Care Chats. Care Chats with Tanya, Mark, and Nick. Care Chats. Care Chats with Tanya, Mark, and Nick. Grab a mug of care and join us for some Care Chats with Tanya, Mark, and Nick. We're excited to be chatting with the dear queer financial coach Hadassah Damien today. A quick note before we start. We recorded this a couple weeks ago when Venus and Mercury were in retrograde. And now we are in Taurus season, so we're encouraged to continue holding these energies about money and resourcing ourselves in a grounded way.
Yes, please. Y'all, we're here for this lovely care chat with Hadassah Damien, an anti-capitalist financial coach. And we're ready to get into it. And before we do, we just want to name that we are here to have a care chat about Venus is currently in retrograde in Aries. And the planet Venus has represents the energies of abundance, love, art, creativity. And we're also here to talk about and maybe share about and chat about some of the financial insecurities that we may be experiencing in our current world and the yuck that's happening in the world. And we're here to share some time with Hadassah because we want to talk about economic and financial hygiene and care and all that good stuff. So we're so happy to be here and queer.
TanyaMarck Nick, thank you for having me. And TanyaMarck, I really love that you brought in the where we are astrologically right now, because when I think about queer people and money, creativity is one of the things that comes to mind. I mean, both just like our natural creativity as our beings, but creative ways of thinking about how we resource our lives and resource our joy are part of what come to mind for me. And as somebody who, and tiny backstory, like I ended up talking about money with people because I was an artist for many years and I wanted to figure out how to resource the art that I was making, pay people, be able to take time off and travel and tour and do my thing. And so I just kind of long story short, figured out how to run little businesses and became less scared talking about money. And now I'm here today. But one of the things that I'm always in tension with is the invitation to be creative, to be outside of the systems that we're in, and the deep belief that I see, or the deep belief I have, and the resilience that I see in people, in particular, like queer creative people, resourcing what we need in and up against the fact that we're also in a specifically financial resource need heavy time and place in space and time, and these two things coexist, right? Like we can figure out how to, creatively community, crowdsource places to perform our art. And we can pass the hat, we can have not a fluff, and sliding scale and do all these things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have health insurance. You know what I mean? Health insurance requires money to pay for it. Like that's pretty much how you get it, unless you're in a federal health insurance, moment, which of course is being dismantled right now. Right. So one of the things I think about is just how we can live at these intersections and these tensions and have multiple things be true and be honest and strategic about that, right? Like not lean too far into one, not lean too far into the other, but use some of our queer magic as shapeshifters and people who can show up in multiple places to actually show up to these different realities. Anyway, I'll pause there.
Yeah, thank you for naming all of that. It's all so much on our mind these days. And I just want to take a moment for all of us listening to this wisdom and juiciness you brought in to just tap in and drop in and just take a moment and breathe and ground and feel that in our bodies. Money is the earth energy. So let's just be in our bodies for a moment, because sometimes thinking about money can shake us up like an earthquake, but let's just come back to our roots, back to our bodies, back to our breath. And acknowledging any fears or anxieties we have when we talk about this stuff. It's scary. It can bring up insecurities from our families or our jobs or our culture. And just feeling the support of the earth or the rocks or the minerals, the trees, whatever helps keep you grounded. Yeah. So, the other day, TanyaMarck and I did a care chat and we talked about like some of the things that we're doing um, to deal with stress and anxiety. And we talked about art and creativity. And I'm wondering for both of you, what you're seeing with some of the folks you work with, that you see people doing or what they're struggling with and how they manage those struggles around finances or you know worry about what's happening with the current administration in our country and loss of funding and that kind of thing.
Nick, I just want to say thank you for also bringing in a grounding moment, because so often, in particular, talking about money, and I know that this is something that you all do, but in particular, talking about money, so many of us get so disembodied and so stressed and so dissociated so quickly. So just like naming that, if you heard the word, we're going to talk about money at the top of this care call, and you immediately felt a little hit, you are in good company. And you can shift that, And so I think, I mean, to me, I'm connecting, like, I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people trying to figure out where their locus of control is. And I think there's so much coming at us that we might be feeling like we have less control than we may in fact have, or we might feel uncertain about where our locuses of control now are because of rapid change and shifting. And this is part of why change is hard. But to me, like, tying back to this creative piece, I think I'm seeing a lot of creativity coming out at this time, because where do we have creativity, or like, where do we have control, right? Our creative production. Or before we started recording, what I said was, you can't take my joy, And I mean, I'm seeing like one of the local sort of like queer kink festivals here in Denver, where I live, is having like an extra party this month. And it's just called We Deserve, because everything is, we deserve something nice while all this is happening, So I'm seeing more energy, like, just, I think, coming into these micro places where we can get embodied, be the agents of decisions, be in queer joy. Not because that's resistance, but that is resilience. That's like building the things that we need in order to show up as we see ourselves, like, able and interested to resistance, I mean, TanyaMarck, what are you seeing with people?
Well, before I take it to what I'm hearing in others that I work with, I guess I want to connect the dot to myself and name this idea of abundance in Venus. That abundance doesn't just have to look in as monetary value. To me, querying abundance means it can look at on all kinds of ways. It can be resources. It can be this very moment is very abundant for us because we're coming together and being able to name exactly how I feel, where I feel the world is, has also been a care tool. And then being able to name it and ground and then talk about it and share about it with others also is to me, a care response to knowing that, like, the economic insecurity or the stress around what's happening, like, we're not alone, I think can also be this care. So in holding space for others, listening, deeply listening, right? And just allowing those moments for people. I think we need I don't want to say that I know I need those moments where I can just unpack it, right, in its purest like form, and that, and to be heard around it, right? And so that to me is what really I feel is like a lot of deep listening, and then inviting in those conversations, like, yeah, like, it's happening and it's happening and impacting all of us, and bringing care into it. Like, let's shimmy and shake, let's clear off any old shit that is coming up around this. I mean, retrograde energy, the REs are to review, to reflect. And so we may be collectively we're being, a lot is happening where it's creating this energy of, instability or insecurity. And then internally, we're also being asked, right, to kind of take a look at that. That's the invite. So how do we work with those layers? And I also feel we come from fucking systems that tell us, oh no, don't talk about abundance. Don't talk about, don't talk about asking for help. And, queerness is we can get really fucking innovative. And I think that and these are great opportunities for us to figure out, how do we do that? How do we get abundant with ourselves? And how do we go, yeah, okay, well, as simple as, hey, I'm a person who lives on my own. Can I somehow pair up with someone in my neighborhood? And when they're buying items, maybe I don't have to buy the whole item because it might, that might not be a good use of that, but can I contribute to purchasing a part of the item, if that makes sense? Like a Costco run, thank you, Costco, for continuing to be a badass, probably doesn't work for a solo person like me. However, I can go into that with someone and say, hey, can I contribute for, I don't know, just getting innovative. I know I'm talking about money, but it's creating, it's being resources to one another. It's all the things.
I want to come back to something you had said, TanyaMarck, about asking for support, because that's something that actually, so in full transparency, TanyaMarck and I have done some work with Hadassah. And it's something that we are working on, is how do we ask for care and support? And I think it's something that can be really hard, especially for queer people, where we may be struggling with self-esteem or lack of worth, and, fear of being told no, fear of feeling like I'm not worthy of whatever it is I'm asking for, or I'm not worthy of what I may receive, even if I do get a yes, like, oh, this is too much, like I'm not worth this much. So I just want to name that and really, again, come back to just noticing any kinds of feelings, resistance, blocks to self-worth around asking and receiving. And I just want all of us to just take a moment and maybe tune into where we might feel that, either currently or if we've worked through it, like remembering having compassion for our past selves who may have healed that wound, and just coming back to our heart space for a moment. And yeah, it can bring up a lot. It can feel, it can, again, coming back to the earth, shake our foundation a little bit.
When I just want to name, when you name that, and somatically, I could feel it in my shoulders. So I want to invite us to find any rolling up and down in the shoulders, opening up the chest. What about you, Hadassah? I know you're going to sprinkle something yummy in here.
I mean, Nick, I love that you brought that in. And I mean, my business that I've had for 10 years is called Ride Free Fearless Money. And part of the reason that I brought in this fearless piece is about this part of whether it's like avoidance or feeling of self-worth, questions, or distaste. Like I think for queer people and like activists and like culture makers and people who are critical of the culture at large, often I see people associating money with like the bad systems, right? So we have this kind of like perception that like having any kind of positive relationship with money means that inherent acceptance of the way things are, right? So there's like all these things, but that often manifests as fear or resistance or avoidance, and that's trying to be with our aspiration for the external world that we want. But Nick, I love that you talked about our aspiration for being the like internally fully authentic person that we also are, right? Like, how do I get to say, yes, I get to have this, and yes, I get to have things. And like for me, I mean, like I grew up in a situation of like poor working class family, single mom, we're living in a projects. There wasn't enough money, right, to find enough all the different ways. And so I had so much to heal for myself about what it meant to even believe that I could have enough, whatever that would mean, right? Whether that was like financial or other types of resourcing. So But that's also made me somebody who's extremely empathetic to the journey of what it is to try to figure that out and to the nuance and complexity of it. Because there's, I really appreciate, and we have to keep naming, like, how we resource our needs is so much bigger than financial. How we care is so much bigger than financial. And of course, sometimes we just need money for certain things, and that's reality.
It feels good. Maybe let's take some breaths, right? Just take a few inhales and exhales and bring in some gratitude, gratitude where that might need to land, right? And just reminding ourselves and our listeners that we're not alone in any of this. And the invite here is to explore care in its myriad of ways that it can show up, and that, yeah, we're just not alone.
Care Chats with TanyaMarck and Nick.